I'll start, because I'm going to start way back with Art Bernard as a youngster. The furthest he got in school was 5th grade, which was very common back. He was born in 1901, so he got a lot of experience working in different companies. Everything from knitting mills to canneries to even sharpening knives at a cutlery factory in New York.
I dropped out of school when I was 14. My job was sharpening blades. Blades came on what we call a board. 3 dozen blades to the board. 36 blades. You got 4 cents. 4 cents a board.
Where it really started, I think, was him going to a school in New Jersey for welding. And basically the first welding engineering school in this country. Learning what there was to know about welding, and then taking that knowledge and being one of the first welding engineers in the country. One of a few that came out of that school.
And the dean of that school was Dr. Humphrey A. Adams, a young graduate out of MIT. On the last day of school, he told me, "You probably know more about arc welding than anyone in the United States." And he said, "The welding industry is as young as you are." He said, "If you stay with it, you will never be hungry. You'll always have a place to live. And clothe yourself decently."
And so he started developing products in our home and had a small shop in our basement in Chicago. So the first products was a clamp for holding materials together for welding, and a second product was a chipping hammer for taking the slag off the weld. And he also developed an electrode holder called a short stub. That was a successful product for Bernard Welding Equipment. That really got them started making some money finally. And I always knew I was going to work with my dad. He said, "You run the business side and let me develop products." He would turn out ideas like nobody can. I had gone into the service and came back from the service and joined him in the business and I became active in marketing and the business side, and he continued to develop products. And we were going to make a wire feeder and gun and sell that. And we discovered that it would be difficult for us to sell that type of a package, but we could sell the welding gun and cable as an accessory. And with our association with Caterpillar, we developed a very successful product that we got in on the ground floor with a product that solved a lot of problems for industry. And within a matter of a few short years, it was the dominant product of its type. The company was very successful. We were making good money. I was 40 years old, and I'd been doing this now since high school. And I thought, is this what I want to do the rest of my life? Maybe there's other things I want to try. And at that time, we were approached by somebody that said, "Have you ever thought about selling your business?" Anyway, we investigated it, and I decided, yep, let's sell it. After we had sold Bernard Company, I got restless and just wanted to get back into some kind of business. And So started a small business selling automatically produced sales orders. The automatic typewriter had just been developed. We need a product. And so
that product was never successful.
no, it wasn't. The one thing we learned is if they're not working, get off of it, get on to something else. So anyway, we decided we ought to have our own product and use this sales system to sell it on a direct basis. And in that we did a lot of drilling in our company and had purchased a lot of, not a lot, but investigated drill sharpeners because we needed them for making our Bernard products. That there ought to be a better way to sharpen drills that a smaller company could afford. And so my father started working on a drill sharpener, completely different than the welding industry. And so we developed the first M1 drill sharpener. And that's about the time that you got involved in the business.
Yeah, so I started in the business in Darex when it was just starting. We were just making prototypes. I worked with my grandfather in the summers, and he said, well, you know, we're starting this business up, and it would really be helpful if you come work for us for a year. And I said, I really don't want to do that. And he said, well, just give me 1 year. And I said, okay, I'll give you 1 year. And the first thing I had to do was get a haircut. Because I had long hair that was the 70s. And he said, there's a barber shop right across the street from the hotel. Go get a haircut. My dad had always thought that at some point there ought to be a way to make drill sharpening available kind of to the masses. I hired an engineer. I hired actually a machinist. And together we worked on kind of the first try at that, which became the M3. And that was a machine it basically used the same process that we use now, or the same mechanism in the chuck and everything. But we redesigned it so that the parts could be made a lot cheaper, and so that it could be mounted to a person's bench grinder, because most shops at that time had a bench grinder. And we began selling that. We actually placed an ad in Popular Science. I remember I paid $10,000 for a one-page ad, and we basically broke even on that, and that kind of started us out. And people said, I like the product, but can you sell us a bench grinder with it? And so we started selling a bench grinder and a plate that was mounted on, so it was all packaged. And that became the M5.
When we decided that we wanted to leave the Midwest, find some better weather, better community, this type of thing, we were mildly successful, but we had about 12 employees. If we're going to move, we've got to move now.
At that time, there's no internet, so we looked in encyclopedias and talked to customers on the phone that we got orders from, and put little marks on a map. And I got in a car and drove across the country, and I drove through Ashland, not even thinking that was on our. I never went on the freeway on this trip, so I drove through Ashland. I made it halfway to Klamath Falls, and I thought, why didn't I stop in Ashland? Something struck me, so I turned around and I came back and met my folks and said, I gotta go check out Ashland. And what's Ashland? So they came and they decided, yep. And that was how complicated it was. We just kind of all said, yep, this is it.
So when we made the move to Ashland, the companies literally started over again. We had none of the employees from back in the line.
And this was a rural part of Ashland. There was a dirt road. The Chrissy Street was a dirt road at at that time. And so
We had cows next to us.
yeah, there was farmland. It's hard to imagine. So, once we had moved and we kind of started over, that's when I started to manage more of the business, and I basically managed the production side of the business. And yeah, so we went from the M5, we developed the E90, E80, E90, which we still sell today. At that time, CNC machining centers were just starting. But even then, we had a lot of manual machines. We had a lot of people pulling handles on drill presses. And people that are still here today, Lorelei, who now manages our international department, that's where she started, was drilling holes on a drill press. Lana, who has worked in sales for a long time, started in assembly.
And actually, they wanted us to not talk quite as much. They really wanted us to focus on productivity, which, if any of you know me, that was kind of a problem for me. So hence why I later ended up in the sales department.
There were 14 people here when I started. The company was a fourth of the size of the building now. Every lunch, everybody sat in there together. It was, we did that every single day. My first day here, I walked in that lunchroom, and it had people sitting at all the tables. And so I saw these two gentlemen sitting by themselves, and I waltzed back there and sat down with them and talked with them. They were so very, very nice. Well, it was Dick Bernard and Arthur Bernard. And I never lived that down from my first day sitting at the table with the bosses.
When we were developing what we call the SP sharpener, which was our first sharpener that really used diamond wheel technology. By using diamond wheel technology, we didn't have to have a lot of motion to account for the wheel being worn away. That took away a lot of the complexity of the sharpening, and so I got this idea. I actually took apart my wife's Dirt Devil vacuum cleaner one weekend, took the motor out of it. We made a little wheel, we stuck on some parts, and we tried it, and it worked. So I had a young guy that we had in the shop doing basically manufacturing it, but that was really bright. I took him and said, come and help me, and that was Jim Wilshire, actually. And so he came into the R&D department and basically made the first prototypes for the drill doctor. And we really just kind of went along. Our goal was to sell enough, that we would sell enough to our current dealers that we would at least pay for all the work that we had done. And it wasn't until the local Snap-on tool guy came around and saw it and said, hey, I think I could sell these.
Snap-on was like the best place to start because Snap-on, they're the people that other people who use tools go, what are those guys using? Those are the pros. And so from there we just started working into other auto channels. Tom sold us eventually got us into kind of Sears one day call, hey, these guys have got us into Sears. And it just started to roll from there.
And we really started to grow in that side of the business. And so we really started taking our focus off Darex product line. And so I decided, because it was such a different market and a place that we had never been before, that we really needed a different team to do this. And we said to all the employees at the time, you can choose which place you can go.
In '97 there was Darex, and then Dave wanted to have two companies, so we had quite a conversation about what we were going to call the new company, but we eventually called it Professional Tool Manufacturing. So we moved over to Tolman Creek, so you had Darex as a company, an LLC, and then you had Professional Tool Manufacturing LLC over on Tolman Creek. Two completely separate companies sharing some technology.
Well, we hired Hank, and he began by hiring some people that were more consumer-oriented Tom was, I think, the first person that you hired.
I'd just been hired way back when, and I hired Tom Fallon, but he came in on a Saturday in his sweatpants, and he'd been here before, and I showed up, and I said, well, do you know where the filing cabinet is that has the records of who we've sold drill doctors to? And he looked at me and went, no, don't you? And I, no. I said, do you know where they are in the computer? And no. And I said, I don't either. So we just had to start scavenging through the office. That's how, we started at this base level of absolutely no knowledge. Didn't even know any customers' names, and we said, wow. Quite frankly, I had a little bit of a knot in my stomach going, oh no. It gave us the feeling of this is a real startup. We didn't have frills, and everyone worked hard, and no one really, I don't remember complaining, but that could just be a defense mechanism. And from there, it just kind of took off in the tool user market. It took a lot more effort in the consumer market, in the Home Depot and the Lowe's and Sears and all that. And in a lot of ways, it really took Paul Harvey to tell everyone this is something you should be thinking about.
Over the years, you've heard me talk about a company in Oregon that makes the drill doctor, the drill bit sharpener. Well, this company is working on solving all of our sharpening needs.
Darex, when Pro Tool left, Darex continued to do well, but right about the second year, so right around 2000, there was a big recession, and that really hit the machine tool industry hard at that time. And so the machine tool industry, which we are a big part of, was almost halved from what it was, and our sales were basically halved. And I didn't really want to be in the manufacturing business anymore. And so I talked with Gary Varney, and we worked out where he took that side of the business and started his own business. I basically sold him the equipment to do that over time. When we separated the manufacturing side of Darex off, I came back in to run Darex. And Darex had now reduced in size quite a bit because we didn't have all the machining. So we moved Darex out of this building into next door, and we moved all the Pro Tools back into this building.
And so at some point, it's hard to run a company with 9 people because if one person leaves, they take a lot of knowledge. So what are you going to do? And so the idea was, well, why don't we just let me run the whole thing, because those people at Darex have a lot of knowledge that could actually help us develop stuff on the drill doctor side. And Dave, you won't have to come to work anymore because you're the one running Darex, and so I can run both. Anyway, it seemed like a good idea, so we can recombine. So Darex, then Darex and professional tool manufacturing. Now all we have is professional tool manufacturing. A couple years later, Dave said, you know what, I want the family name back on this business. I want Darex. That stands for Dave, Arthur, Richard, EX.
There was a big debate in here in this room actually, about what we should do, and I finally said to Hank, I want it to be Darex. And I wanted it just from a historical standpoint.
So then we changed professional tool manufacturing. It actually ceased to exist, and we changed the name back to Darex. It's confused the heck out of people in town. They don't know, why do you guys keep changing your name? It's a long story, but in the end it all made sense.
Well, I think the workshop started at probably the beginning of it was, what's the next tool to sharpen?
Started talking about chisels in the woodworking market. 14 months later, we came out with a new product, the Worksharp 3000.
Well, Kyle was real busy essentially launching the Worksharp 2000 and 3000 product line. And so I had time to go play and actually developed the first KTS. We had a different code name for it back on that project. And we followed up with that roughly a year and a half later with the original KTS.
Did you get it?
Well, the KTS, quite frankly, was received even better than my expectations. It took off faster than I ever expected it to do.
The story of Darex, and probably a lot of family businesses, but the story of Darex, I think, is as much about family and friendship than anything else. I think the fact that it's that it's been 4 generations. I think it's because each of us as fathers or children have genuinely liked our father and our son, as we go. It isn't just that because we have to, it's because we want to.
And our family has made this, the whole environment of working here, a place where I'm free to take risks, take on challenges, make failures, have successes, and then share in that success. It's a really exciting place to be, and I know we've got a strong future doing this. Yep.
I think I'm kind of proud of the fact that we haven't created a culture where it's all about you got to succeed and you got to drive everything to the nth degree to get the most you can. It's more about let's do a really good job and let's enjoy our lives while we do that.
I don't think that many other employers provide that much opportunity. So I'm really grateful for that because I too am in a great spot. I love what I do. I love coming to work.
The company is the people. And so all of you who are here today, whether you're working here now or will be your kids in the future or previously were Darex.